Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for joining us. Well, I'm saying good evening. It depends on what part of the world you're joining us on today. My name is Dr. Glory Edozian, and I am a LinkedIn visibility and thought leadership coach. And what I do is I help mid to senior level female executives build visibility and thought leadership for boards. I'm super excited because we have an amazing guest today on our LinkedIn Live. In fact, I haven't done a LinkedIn Live in a while, so I'm really, really excited because of today's guest. I feel like if I was going to do a live with anybody at this time, this is the right person. And she's coming to us with so much interesting research work, and I can't wait to share. But before we get started, I really love to know who's listening to us today. So welcome. If you are joining us, please put in your name and your what city you're joining us in from today. And would love to welcome you, would love to give you a shout out. Even if you're watching this after, please feel free to put your name and the city you're joining in from. And this is a collaborative conversation, so please feel free to join. So Judy, how are you?
Hello, hello. Hi, Glory. Good to see you again. And thank you for having me. Hello to everybody out there listening in. It's so lovely to be on the platform again. So, yeah, good to be here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Judy, we have so much to get to today. I'm really worried about time. So let me get started. So Judy, today we're talking about developing the next generation of women board leaders, right? And this is off sort of the backdrop of a lot of the research work that you've been doing. Super interesting research work. But I'm gonna just introduce you really briefly, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of things. So Judy is the Chief Marketing Officer of Quantum PKI. Did I get that correct? The
That's it. Yeah.
pronunciation? Yes.
Yeah.
She's an AI and digital trust enthusiast and a member of the CMO Council's Africa Advisory Board member. She has tons of experience across the paper industry, an engineering diploma, and so many other qualifications that I'm just looking at. I'm just like, oh my God, if I read all of this, it's going to take forever. But she has received her director certification from the Institute of Directors in South Africa. Her experience, like I mentioned earlier, lies in areas of business and marketing strategies, portfolio analysis, and business change management. So Judy is coming to us today with a lot of corporate experience, but also with a lot of board experience as well and research experience. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two different worlds collide, or three different worlds collide as we have this conversation. So Judy, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself to get us started?
Sure. Thank you. So, the things you don't read about is that I'm a mom. I have a 20-year-old daughter that's studying law at the
Oh, what?
moment. Yes. And I've been a single mom for literally since she was around 6 years old. So my journey has been spurred on by quite a lot of that in my life, being a single parent, raising a daughter, getting her through the teenage years. And I'm sure there's lots of moms on this call. So you guys know the journey. And I think, you know, aside from being a mom, being thrown into the academics and being in academia for most of my journey has been a two-part fold series of my life. And I love learning. I love coming up with new innovative ideas and solutions within the corporate world, in boardrooms, and just having a lifestyle of just lifelong learning. And that's really who I
Mm.
am. Yeah.
I think that's amazing, a lot of moms will be able to sort of relate to that story of sort of juggling the corporate world, being a mom, and those responsibilities. But I'm super interested because, like, when I was introducing you earlier, I mentioned, you're an AI enthusiast. You worked in the mining sector, marketing, all of that. What then inspired your research into corporate boards and female leadership?
Absolutely. Yeah, so interesting journey. Being in the engineering space was really, I was the first female to have done electronics at school. So I was in an all boys class right at the age of, I think, 15 or so. And my journey into my career in the engineering space, of course, being in mining, was also very much male dominated. I think when I first got into my first board role, I was probably about 15, 20 years ago. That's a while back. And I was thrown into this role purely because I was an expert in my field and the board felt that I could add value. And at that stage, I didn't really know much about a board, seeing that I just coming off a lot of VP and executive roles and being on executive teams. I felt that I needed to know more. What am I actually going to contribute, and what value that I would really bring to the team?
Mm.
So that was when I started to research once again. And after completing an MBA, you kind of want to research more and more, and that's really what my lifestyle has been. And I decided to do my certification through the IODSA, learning about what my role really meant. What is governance all about? How do I show up in a way that I was different or added more to the role of an executive leader, being in an executive role? So that was really how I'd started my journey. And when I'd found myself then now being more learned in that space, I would say the first few months was really transitioning into, what do I do here? How do I fit in? What am I supposed to say? How do I add value? And having then done the qualifications that I needed to, and then looking into the space of boards and how they develop, having conversations with a number of other individuals on boards, looking at role models and mentorship in that area, I started to think there was something more around this. I couldn't be the only person trying to understand how it is that I could add value and be a significant someone on a board. I then started to have more conversations around what type of training there is aside from the IODSA, which is very much a technical qualification, but really around the softer side of things, being an only female on a male-dominated board, what that meant, and how it is that I could transition as a person. I then started to look at all the various training programs. I had conversations with organizations in Australia, out in the UK, and a few of my colleagues out in New Zealand, just trying to gather insights. And then I started to embark on a doctoral study around this. I felt that there was just so much that needs to understand. And that's when I got to, doing this PhD work.
Fantastic. I think that's such an almost a journey of discovery in a way, Judy, isn't it? So
Yes.
sort of saying, I want to know more, I want to know more, I want to know more. And now that you've known more, you're sharing it with us, which is absolutely fantastic. My question though to you is, in those initial times of being on a board, what were the lessons that you wish you had known earlier? Because it sounds like almost like board leadership was in a way thrust upon you. So what were the things that you wish you had known when you started?
The things that I learned later on, of course, was it's not about your technical role. So initially, I thought, well, I'm an expert in the marketing and business strategy space. I just needed to be better at that. But that
Hmm.
wasn't the answer. I needed to have a diverse and collective view of the world around me. So I needed to have an understanding of the IT world. I needed to have an understanding of the HR domain. Not everything in depth, but I needed to have a broader understanding. But also from a governance point of view, what are the do's and don'ts? I didn't understand then that I could be a dissenting director. And now that I know that, I could have shown up differently and done things differently. So there's a lot of lessons learned in terms of the journey. Going back to the old days, I was quite naive. I was fairly young on a board, trying to do my technical role really well, as opposed to having a diverse perspective of a board and how it could deliver exceptionally more than what it was in the current state and form.
Amazing. It just strikes me, I find that we tend to do this thing where we're giving this thing and we think, okay, I'm just going to go deeper. I'm just going to go deeper and work harder. And which is kind of like what you did. Meanwhile, what you needed to do was look up and be more strategic and join the dots. So
Yes.
having that experience for women who are looking for their first board role, that are thinking to themselves, okay, I just have to be a better expert. I just have to work harder. What would your advice be for them as they start to look for their first board role?
So I think the first step is having a conversation around why do I want to be there? What is the inspiring piece around me wanting to be on a board? And there's various, let's say, there's various feedback in terms of why one wants to do that. One, it's an accolade, of course, because you've now transitioned into a board and great, now I'm there. But one is I have so much knowledge that I want to share it, and I want to be able to help a business move into a different space. So there's different ways of looking at it. So if I had to say what is the advice? The advice is firstly know why you're wanting to do it. That's the first thing. And then second thing is about having the time and energy to prepare oneself. When I mean prepare, I don't mean go and do a course. Prepare means how do I navigate this role and how do I understand on a deeper level who are the key stakeholders that I would engage in this type of setup. Whether it is inviting yourself to a board meeting where you get firsthand of what actually happens and what are the conversations that I get carried out on a board. Try and do those things first. And once you've got a grasp of really knowing what the boardroom is all about, conversations happen outside of the boardroom and conversations happen inside of the boardroom. The ability to have the EQ to understand both inside and outside the boardroom, that type of learning is done over a period and over time. The next thing I would recommend is to get yourself a sponsor. Find a mentor or a sponsor. We all have role models, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO or the chairperson in a specific business. It could even be in your child's school. There's a board there, there's a committee there. Liaise with them, have a conversation with them, try to possibly get into that boardroom setup to get a first hand experience of what happens in a boardroom. I think every organization and every industry is completely unique, but try to find organizations that are more aligned to the business that you're interested in and then take it from there. So there's a few things that one can do to prepare oneself to get to that space.
Thank you. I think I really love the sort of examples you gave, especially the idea of, whether it's through simulations, but just putting yourself so that you understand the language of a board and what happens, right? And because I think that then prepares you and why broadens your understanding of how to prepare for those opportunities, right? So fantastic advice there. But let's now go to your research because I find that really interesting. As part of your research, one of the things that you did was you interviewed 19 women, I believe. What
Yes.
surprised you about interviewing? What was the thing that struck you from those interviews?
Yes, so there were quite a few things, but maybe the first thing to point out was every single female on that journey had a unique experience. They were similar in some respects, but very unique from the perspective that everyone had a story to tell, and there were critical moments in their journey that unpacked a number of things. So, one example was a female that she had a very, very difficult leader, her CEO, um, in the space that it ruined her self confidence. It
Wow.
made her feel less than. She eventually left the role, but she then realized that it gave her the opportunity to build resilience. So, what I found throughout those journeys was the ability to build resilience out of one, chaotic situations, or two, issues that really broke spirit, character, and so on. So, there were those examples. There was also instances where there were people that really lent a hand to an individual that became the CEO within a 5 year period. So I think the value of having a mentor or sponsor is really key. Someone that really is able to assist you, guide you, show you the way, that type of thing. So I think that was quite valuable. I think shockingly, I found that a number of women had mental health issues that they
Wow.
didn't speak about. There was one female that actually landed up in hospital as a result of the mental health issues she was experiencing being on the board. So there was a handful of individuals that really pushed on and pressed hard, that had support. And then there were other individuals that really threw in the towel, felt that their well-being was more important and left to do other things. There was a handful of individuals that got onto boards, realized that it really wasn't for them, and they became entrepreneurs because they felt they could add more value in an entrepreneurial kind of environment, started up their own businesses. So there was very diverse type of feedback in terms of the individuals that I had the opportunity. Let's say it was really exciting to speak to them and hear about their journey, but very diverse, very diverse.
It sounds like there was a lot of openness as well in those conversations you had with them, and there's a lot of trust, which sort of allowed exposure of some of these deep rooted challenges that we may not talk about often. Especially sort of around mental health, which is really, really important. I'm also curious about how the women that experience these different challenges, were they and chose to stay on boards, how were they able to navigate these challenges, especially when you look at the backdrop of the now more complex issues that organizations are facing globally.
So the navigation was, I would say, self-developed in many respects. So I found that they grabbed the opportunities that came to them, and they used them as sounding boards to grow and elevate themselves. So whether it was a negative situation or a positive situation, there were lots of them that said, I'm going to now find a new way of doing things, and I'm going to put myself out there. The biggest challenge that most women had was self confidence. They needed to know that they can do this job and they can do this job well. Oftentimes, they felt the latter, that they can't do it. Maybe let someone else take the baton, and that type of thing. But I think, just coming back to your point around how do women navigate this kind of thing, it's around having that circle in and around them, whether it is within the board team. And often they found that it's not the board team that are their advocates. The advocates are family, friends, other
Wow.
co-workers, and in their previous roles, and mentors and sponsors. So advocacy is quite an important piece that, I think there are some individuals that, well, let's say they spent a number of years on a board. They've been on that same board with the same team for 10 to 12 years, for example. Advocacy then results, it starts to surface then, but not early on, in the roles. That's a fact, yeah.
I mean, as I listen to you, one of the things that sort of strikes me is the quote of, the higher you go, the lonelier it becomes. So it's almost like, that is, we always say talk about it sort of at CEO level. Interesting to find that women also feel somewhat alone or without corporate support structures, at least in sort of in the boardroom. And this idea of having that sort of family or familial support outside of the boardroom, and the idea of advocacy is super interesting, and maybe things that are not actually really spoken about. I think many times when we talk about women on boards, we're talking about leadership, power, and negotiation, all those things, and forgetting about the softer side and the support that is required to allow women thrive on boards. And I think that's sort of an interest. Did you find that as an interesting finding from your research? I'm just interested.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, there were a number of females that went through either divorce, or partners leaving them as a result of their careers. There's been that, but there's also been there was one individual whom I absolutely love and adore. She's just amazing, and she comes from a family of board members. You know, all her aunts are board members, her sisters are board members, her mom was on a board, so she had no choice but to be on a board. And her grooming came from her family. You know, she was her first board role was at the age of 26. I mean, you know, so
Wow.
she was so well prepared for that role. You know, so well prepared. But I think family support is really, really vital. If you don't have the family support, whether it's with your kids that need to be managed or your partner, it can have detrimental effects for sure.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious also about the other aspects of findings from your research. What other things did you find in terms of, because I find that, and the reason why I'm asking is I find that maybe the conversations we're having now about female leadership on board, maybe they're a bit monotonous, and your research is highlighting under undercurrents that are not really being spoken about. So it'd be great to hear more.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that came out was the fact that there needs to be more dialogue with male counterparts. So, one always thinks of the female and her realm and her sphere, but the opportunity to have more dialogue with male counterparts has a number of positive effects. One being the ability to construct conversations around a male dominated environment. So that would be one. The second one would be having the opportunity to jointly develop programs for female leadership and female development, because there are nuances that females have an appreciation of, and so do men. But jointly, those two individuals could really come together and build programs that could change the landscape and change the dynamic of the way boards are run currently. I mean, we all know the stats around the number of females on boards versus males, and the fact that there's opportunity in every environment. What's pleasing to see, the UK has moved up to 40% already in terms of their board male female relationship on the stock exchange. So that's really great. But I mean, South Africa is still far to go, around close to 20% currently. And I think having that opportunity to do that, aside from that, there are the soft skills. It's around the communication aspects. It's about the ability to be able to present yourself. And I think those things, if women take it upon themselves to learn and to grow, knowing what trends are out there, whether it's cybersecurity or AI, for example, is getting your teeth stuck into those areas. And I think the first thing that every female should be doing that's in the corporate environment is to have their Google Alerts set up with the key industries that they need to know about, and find good enough reading material so that when you do get into conversations, those things help you. You're not sitting there from a technical standpoint, only able to give technical view on a matter. So being innovative is huge. I think almost 90% of the females that I chatted to said to me that research, research, research. A third of their day is spent on doing research, whether it is around a problem that they're facing or a trend that's up and coming or the environment that they want to master. Research is huge.
Wow, so much to unpack there. I really like the idea of the joint approach to female development, because I think that like you said, that really can help change the landscape. But I also like the practical advice around setting up the Google alerts, so that you have a more nuanced view of the world that these different companies are operating in. Judy, I'm so engrossed in the conversation. I've forgotten to welcome the audience to the conversation. If you're just joining, it's myself and Judy Gooden, and we're talking about her research around pipeline development for female leaders in the corporate boardrooms. And we were having a super interesting conversation. If you're just joining, please feel free to put your name, where you're joining in from, in the chat, and we'll welcome you. Also, we'd love for this to be a collaborative conversation. So feel free to put your questions or aha moments in the chat as well, and we'll be sure to highlight them. Okay, so I feel like maybe we need to sort of backtrack a bit and look at what, in terms of the women you interviewed, both those that made it into the research and just your anecdotal sort of information that you may have. What are the systemic barriers that keep women from actually getting on board? We've talked a lot about what happens when they're on boards, but what actually prevents them from getting on board?
Sure. So, in a lot of organizations, it's almost seen as if the females that are in the pipeline are not good enough yet. So there's that syndrome that comes up.
Mm.
They're not good enough yet. They need to get to a certain level before they get appointed on a board. And what then happens is they do appoint females outside of the organization, and that is one of the biggest barriers. The females just never get the opportunity to do that. So they kind of lose hope and faith in that, well, I'm never going to meet the mark, so I rather focus on something else. So that's one thing, one aspect. The second aspect is around the fact that they haven't transitioned or haven't gotten the credentials that they need, them personally. In some instances they have, in some instances they haven't. But the third problem is they're not exposing themselves to those environments. They're hidden in an area, whether it's HR or IT or marketing for that matter. They're kind of hidden. They're not exposing themselves. They're not exposing themselves to other projects. So what I really think is hugely vital, and this came from one or two of the conversations I had with the ladies, was that she was in the HR domain. That was her technical skill, but she wanted to leverage her skills and knowledge in other areas because she was one of the innovative individuals that constantly looked at systems and processes and procedures that she wanted to improve in the organization. So she latched onto the IT, the CIO, and said to him that I'd love to get a view of what projects are happening currently. And what she then did was volunteered to work in a syndicate, in a team. And she was then able to grasp around the different areas of the business. And she was then able to add value. And she slowly made her way into a soundboarding individual within that team in the IT space. She then transitioned into a board role 6 years later, only because she actually had family issues, etc. But she did transition into a board role. So there are areas where females are able to put themselves out there, grasp the opportunities that are available, and if there are no opportunities available, find them. I challenge you to find them because they are there. There is no business that anyone can say there aren't challenges. Find the challenges and get involved with the team that is working on those challenges, and you're sure to get into the board. That's for sure.
I really like that sort of almost self-advocacy way of positioning for boards, finding the problems that are interesting for you to solve, almost latching on to an expert, understanding sort of the terminology and the language, and then applying sort of your strategic thinking to solving those challenges, and then becoming sort of this trusted advisor, right, on
Yeah.
those issues. I think that's I think what I'm hearing is that there are many pathways to the board. But the one pathway that does not exist is the standstill pathway of of just standing still and burying your head deeper. It sounds like there are different ways to segue. And thank you for sharing all of those with us. But one of the things that strikes me, so I had a conversation with somebody the other day that blew my mind, and she was saying to me how men as young as 35 are being appointed to boards, especially in sort of, fast moving sectors like technology and all of that. And I started thinking to myself, where was I when I was 35? What was I doing? Why wasn't I thinking about all these high level leadership opportunities, apart from the lady that you mentioned who got her first board role when she was 29, but because she's coming from an ancestry of of board roles, right? So, and then you mentioned this thing around how corporate organizations are not even appointing female board leaders from internally and are going outside and feeling like those who are internal are not quite ready. And I'm wondering about the board readiness programs we have, and if they are actually working to make women ready. And I really love your. Obviously, I know you don't have a full view of all the board readiness programs, but I'm wondering what are your thoughts around where should women be specializing, maybe not specializing, but actually being trained for board readiness. What do you think are the gaps? What do you think are the opportunities?
So let's start with the gaps. So the gaps are the fact that there isn't a clear-cut female-orientated board program. The IODSA has just come up with one now. I haven't attended any of those sessions, but I know that it is based around the challenges that females have. So having said that, from a training perspective, there's the so let's split out the technical aspects, and technical aspects around governance a female can get just about anywhere. There's lots of them. It's the other soft skills that is a challenge, and that's where the gap is. And I think that part of a training program should have a sponsor and a mentor that is currently on a board. So I currently have a mentor I'm a certified director, and I have a mentor who is a chartered director within the IODSA. So they've paired us as, let's say, pairs that would exchange, cross learn. It's almost like a mentee mentor, but cross learning kind of relationship. And I think the best opportunities are through storytelling. Those are the gaps that exist. There isn't sufficient storytelling. There isn't opportunities where a female at the age of 30 is able to have a conversation with, let's say, a 40 or 50-year-old female or male that's been on boards, that has transitioned through boards, that can give them sound advice and how to show up. So those are the things that are lacking. I think if that program could bring all of these facets together, it would be a sound program.
I love that, the idea of storytelling. So almost the creating that relatability factor of saying, okay, this has been my journey. This can be your journey too. These are the mistakes I've made, and I think that potentially could be really powerful. Um, what I know, there's some programs that have sort of the sponsor mentorship, and I think that's really important because again, it can help with navigating that journey, helping you to just making sure that your pathway to the board is paved in a more direct way. But I'm also now interested in how you think. We've talked about the perspective from a woman's perspective, right? What are the gaps? What are the opportunities? But how can boards benefit from this diversity? Because people could be listening to this now and saying, okay, but if we have people that are already qualified, why do we have to be doing this? What are your perspectives around diversity, and what can boards gain from that diversity?
Sure. So diversity comes in many facets. It's not specifically around women and men. It's around what is your background. What have you done in your journey, and you'll find now that if I was to look back 10, 15 years ago, a board was made up of chartered accountants, and that was what the board looked like. It's a bunch of chartered accountants. And now what's transitioning into is you need an HR person, you need a digital person, you need someone that's on the legal side, you need someone that is on the IT front, so that the collective on the board has a diverse input. When we talk about diversity, it's about having the ability to be innovative, constructively innovative. A bunch of CAs, and forgive me if there's any CAs on the call. I have nothing against you guys. It's about having the opportunity to come up with ideas that are different to the collective mindset of a CA group of people. If we had to look at, let's say, marketing, because that's kind of my specialty too, right? Marketing has the ability to be really creative in various aspects from a business standpoint, from a thought leadership standpoint, and from a trend standpoint. So a marketing person is able to bring all of those to the boardroom table. So the ability to think differently and come together, especially in terms of crises, where you need an innovative mind collective to come up with a solution that is different to what you've tried to do before or failed at doing before. So that's where diversity plays a huge role. But having said that, I found that there needs to be a lot of patience around diversity, because it's really great to say you want a diverse bunch of people, right? But you need to be patient enough to listen to the individuals that bring the diverse thinking to the table. So that's quite important. And I find that boards that haven't been diverse are trying to be diverse more from the perspective that they want a tick box, but the behavior has to be aligned to be able to embrace the diverse thinking. So that's a different journey and a different topic altogether, is the ability to, be inclusive. We say we want to be inclusive, but the behavior tells you differently, right? So those are the experience that a lot of the females shared with me. We're inclusive, but actually I have the last say.
Interesting. Layers of inclusion almost, right? So yes, we want to be diverse, but there are layers to the inclusion. So yes, we can have this conversation, but at the end of the day, this is what happens. I think it's really important to point that out actually, because so that we're not just having a tick box exercise. I was talking to somebody recently, and they're talking about how even business strategy is changing because the audience and the consumers of the products the companies are creating, uh, the audience is changing and is getting younger, and so the board in a way has to be representative of that customer base. So it's interesting to see what kind of difficulties may arise from diversity, and how the behavior is actually really important. Um, there
Absolutely. I
was
mean, I
something.
have sorry, just one quick example around the whole diversity. So I was on a team with a fairly older gentleman, and they believed in writing white papers, only writing white papers, lots of copy content. And of course, in the digital era, videos uh, are much more relevant. They communicate the message as we are now, as opposed to me writing a thesis and I'm able to share my research over a video call, much more relevant. And the transition from a mindset of old thinking around white papers to new ways of doing things, there's that transition that needs to happen. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic, fantastic. Really, really, really interesting. I think that example sort of grounds it, grounds the need to accept that behavior, and to create, because it then helps you, it creates forward thinking, essentially, right?
Correct.
So thanks for that example. I'm interested. One of the things you said was around confidence of women who are sitting on boards. And, I found it strange almost that even at that level, we're still having issues around confidence. So, what is your advice for women who feel either intimidated by their responsibilities and challenges of, whether it's their first board role, or as they're building their board leadership journey?
Sure. So, there's a lot of, I would say, tradition that comes to play from a culture point of view. And for, I would say, 50% of the females that come from very conservative mindsets and traditional backgrounds where the female needs to be quite subservient. And that's pretty much the norm in the South African continent, for sure. And that's already a challenge for them, because here in the home front, you need to be this subservient, I wouldn't say not very confident, but, a subservient a human being, but in the boardroom, you need to be assertive. And they struggle with being assertive. So I think that is a learning journey. It is a learning curve. The ability to be assertive in an environment comes with time, and I think one needs to practice that, be able to learn and grow as you try to be assertive, understand what being assertive is, watch people that are assertive in the environment, whether it's a board, whether it's in any kind of senior environment, and watch what they do, and then tell yourself that I can be that too. Convince yourself that you can be that individual as well, whoever your role model is. And I think it's so important that every single person has their role model, whether it's Michelle Obama, whether it is someone in your family, but have that model and try and tell yourself that you can do it. And once you've convinced yourself that you can do it, the road becomes that much easier. So everyone can do it. Glory and I on this team having a fat conversation here, and we've been able to be assertive. So I think everybody on this call, you can do it too.
I'm always intrigued about how cultural nuances that sort of shape societal expectations for women show up in different ways and in different places, and can be almost like glass barriers that prevent women, from showing up in different ways. And it seems like no matter how high you go, these things, one is always confronting these expectations, these norms, or these things, unspoken rules that have sort of shaped us. One of the things that, your research is obviously based in South Africa, but I'm sure has global relevance, right? What are some of the ways or some of your thinkings around the findings and how they translate globally?
Sure. So they certainly resonate with females across the globe. Culture is the only nuance I would say that is quite different, but culture happens in every context. You work with different individuals in different environments. So whether you're based in the States or whether you're in the UK or the Philippines for that matter, there are different cultural contexts. And I think the research unpacks having the ability to acknowledge that there are different cultural contexts that exist and how you need to navigate around those. So that's the key point on that. But aside from that, the other areas around the ability to communicate, your technical skills, having the passion to want to do something and make a difference, and that's one of the things that came out in the research is being passionate. It's not like you go to the library and you say, okay, I'm going to fetch some passion and I'm going to fetch some of this and some of that. It's about innately as a human being passionate about what you want to achieve in your world and those around you. That is one of the key areas, and that's across the board. So if we were to talk about global context versus South African context, I would say 90% of the research is very much global orientated and has relevance.
I love the point around culture. Yes, culture may differ, but culture is something that is pervasive, right? And it shows up in different ways. So I find that point super interesting. And as we progress, we're coming towards the end now. One of the things I'm sort of interested in is we've really talked about what women should do, and we've talked about the need for the interplay between men and women and sort of development programs. But what should organizations be doing and government to dismantle some of these structural barriers or systemic barriers?
So the first thing that comes to mind, and the one of the more important things that this research unpacks, is that a female has many responsibilities, and that would be her home responsibilities. The raising of the children are her responsibility, and she takes that on, and she takes that on really well. But she also takes on the leadership role, and she takes that on very well as well. But I believe that the ability to offer females more flexible working hours, the ability to be able to fetch their children when they need to be fetched, or having to be home for whatever family emergency or crisis that's needed, and not to have raised eyebrows. So there was two instances where there was a female that said to me, well, she needed to fetch her son from school, and he was terribly ill, and she just wasn't allowed to do it. Or her male counterparts had raised their eyebrows at her because she wanted to leave early. So those are the kinds of things where female feel they lose confidence. And I think from a policy point of view, and organizations starting to build the culture around that it is okay. You are a mom, and it is okay to be a mom, and it is okay to be needed in your home environment. And I think females, once they know that it's okay, they're more confident. The confidence comes through. One of the board members said to me she had negotiated her contract that she will always leave the office at 2 p.m. and return at 3 p.m. because she needed to fetch her children from school. And that was part of her contractual agreement. So there's those type of things, board meetings that cannot go on for hours till 6 p.m. when there's dinner that needs to be organized. So it's those kinds of things. And I think it doesn't need to be something that's cut and dry, but policy around developing females, but giving them the opportunity to develop and want to be in the boardroom, and having the flexibility around their family life is vital.
It's very important, but it's strange to me because we've been having these conversations for years, almost. These are, every time we go, oh, they must be this, they must be that, blah 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 blah. What? Why do you think we're slow in embracing these required changes?
So it's decades of unlearning behavior, right? It's decades of having men in boardrooms and dominated by male counterparts. So that transition takes a really long time. Seeing that there's a very small amount, a small percentage of females that are on boards, but I think I wouldn't say that it's not going to happen in this decade or the next, but I think as women start to emerge and get into the boardroom, they need to then become the advocates. How many females that are on boards have a mentee that they're grooming to get onto the board next? So if every single female that are in every single board out there, whether it's South Africa or across the globe, has a female that they're grooming to get onto a board, I think that would be a secure way to move forward. But aside from that, the advocacy is also with the male counterparts, and this joint kind of collaboration that I referred to earlier.
Yeah, yeah, and that sort of starts to bring me to the end of my questions. So, as part of your research, you have a proposed framework. What specific policies and programs do you see having immediate impact? Because, like you said, it's slow learning, it's years of unlearning. Um, but what programs have you seen will have the most immediate impact on developing female leaders for board roles?
So the immediate impact is sponsorship and mentorship. That would be the first thing. That would be the first thing, and then being a qualified director with the IODSA or whichever organization that qualifies you in that regard would be an immediate return for that individual, because then you're qualified and you understand all of those dynamics. So I think having the sponsor, um, and doing the technical skills behind, having the technical skills behind you, those would to me would be the two secure and quick wins for any individual that's wanting to get into the boardroom. Having that sponsor is key, and having the technical qualification can't set you back. So that would be big for an individual, for sure.
Fantastic. Judy, there's no way I can have you on here as somebody who is a visibility expert and not ask you a question on visibility. what what do you I mean, we've talked about things around self-advocacy, we've talked about confidence, we've talked about even your journey to the board. But how do you see, or if at all, did you see visibility as playing any nuanced role in helping women attract these types of leadership opportunities?
Me personally.
Or either you personally, the women, or maybe it was visibility was called something else.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts? It may not have been called visibility, but what are your thoughts around that?
So, any female that, or any person that wants to be made visible, if they've chosen that they want to be made visible, they will find ways and means to be made visible. They'll find ways to get involved or show up. So I think it's an internal dynamic that
Mm,
visibility is within. A lot of times, whether it's male or female, you're waiting for someone to show you up and give you the accolade. And if you're waiting for that, then you probably are in the level of mediocrity, below average type of individual. And I don't mean it in any negative way at all. But if you want to be in that upper echelon group of people, it's about you wanting to have visibility and making that happen. And 100% of those females that I've interviewed all said to me that they took up the baton, they put up their hand, and they made something happen for themselves.
I'm always doing these interview series, and one of the things that we found in our last series is this idea of self advocacy for attracting board roles. Women who actually went up and said, "Oh, this is what I want. These are the types of opportunities I'm
Yeah.
looking for," and almost this idea of putting a bet on yourself and putting yourself forward for those opportunities. Obviously, having the stats to back you up when you are asked pivotal questions about why you qualify for those types of opportunities. But this idea of self-advocacy really being key. And so that tailors to what you're saying around, first of all, seeing yourself and putting yourself up for those opportunities instead of waiting for other people to put you on that to put you up or to show you to help you show up. So that's interesting. My
But also,
final question, sorry, go ahead.
I would just add just on that last point around being visible. But there needs to be some research. So if you're in, let's say, a specific industry, go and find all the types of businesses that you could potentially be on a board. Research that, make a list, have a notebook of all the companies that you think would be able to use your talent, and then start connecting with those individuals, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's personally. So you narrow it down for yourself. You can't say that you want to be on a board and there's 10 100 board roles available, but which board do you want to be on? So there has to be some homework from the individual as well.
Fantastic. And I
Last
think
question.
a mentor, no, I think a mentor or a sponsor can also help to frame what that could look like as well on that journey as well.
Yes.
My
Yes.
my final question, and thank you to everybody. I can see we have quite a few people on LinkedIn who are watching. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask, because I can see we've used almost an hour, Judy. Believe it or not, time goes by when you're having fun. My final question is really around what should current, and I know we've touched on this in bits and bobs. What should current board members, both male and female, do to ensure our pipeline for the next generation of female board leaders?
So, absolutely. And I think it's an indictment on board members that do not do what you just described now. I think that they, as individuals, should be looking out for potential individuals that could join their board, whether it is from a shadow perspective, whether it is just inviting them to meetings, to introduce them. One of the things I found through the research was that there are some junior boards. So you would have a board and then you have a junior board of young individuals, and it is a phenomenon that's coming up quite quickly, especially in the UK, where there's a junior board. So it's obviously younger individuals that have the merit to possibly potentially get onto that board, and that's the juvenile team that are being, let's say, hand reared by the board currently. So that kind of thing could work really, really well. And I think it is a responsibility of every board member to be able to train, mentor, sponsor an individual, even if it means them doing it for a season and not necessarily letting that person be on a board, but do it anyway so that it helps an individual to get onto a board, perhaps in a different organization.
I really like the idea of junior boards, and you and I were even talking about apprenticeships earlier on before we joined the call. So,
Yeah.
and because I think the it's almost like a shadow board, right?
Yes.
And these types of things help to build that sort of exposure early enough and equip people early enough with those types of, and maybe because in a real board meeting you might not be able to have observers, when you're talking about strategy and pricing and things that are a bit more confidential. So having those
Yes.
types of junior boards may help deal with some of those confidentiality issues.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Judy. This has been an enriching conversation. Um, my final question around that. So now that you've done the research, what's next? What's next, Judy?
I'm not going to be studying anymore and I'm not doing any more work. I'm getting to the chapter where I'm just having a lot of fun.
Good. You deserve that. You deserve that. But
Thank
where can we
you.
read more about the research? Where can we read the research? Have you published anything? Are there abstracts we can read? Where can we find more information?
Not yet. The public, it will be made public, I would say, in February, March next year.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So this is actually hot off the press then, Judy. This
Yes, it
conversation is
is.
hot off the press.
It is indeed.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Judy. So, thank you so much to everyone that's joined. We've had a fantastic conversation about, building the next generation of female leaders for board roles. And Judy, we've really hinged on Judy's research and findings, and some of them have been quite telling. A lot of things, that maybe we don't even talk about. So things for advocacy and support for women on boards, mental health challenges for women on boards, things around confidence, and even how do we prepare women for board roles, and actually looking at tailored offerings for women. But fundamentally, what is coming out for me here is the need for a joint approach, right? And intentional succession planning for female board leadership, and actually having that, even if it's not, for a very long time, but actually specific thrusts of succession planning. It's co-owned, right? So it's not a female
Yes.
thing, it's not a male thing, but it's co-owned by the board. And the need for women to also be more, to employ self-advocacy, to widen their knowledge of the world and what's going on around them. I think for me, one of the things I'm taking on here is what you said about the Google alerts, and this idea that there are many routes to the board, right? It's not just that hard work, put your head down route, but actually saying, okay, what interests me? What kind of boards can I sit on? Where I feel I could offer the most value and really be passionate about my role there and the value I can bring. And how can I research and learn more? We may not all go do a PhD, but actually, just be aware of what's happening in the world and the interplays between the complexities of what's happening in the business world and what's happening in the world, and being able to understand and provide salient advice and strategic advice to organizations who are navigating through those challenges. Super important and really interesting. And I think women can actually build that resource for themselves. And this idea of, yes, you're a technical expert, but how does your technical expertise translate in a more strategic way? So thanks, Judy, for opening our eyes to the issues, how women can prepare themselves, how boards themselves can actually become more diverse, not just in tick box, but actually in changing their behavior to actually be more inclusive. We've also learned that there are layers of inclusion, and we need to deepen that if boards are going to be successful. Thank you so much, Judy.
Absolutely.
This was riveting conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody.
Okay, everyone. Well, if you're watching this later on, you missed the live show, but I'm glad you can still watch the recorded version. Please make sure you get in touch with Judy on LinkedIn. Ask her questions. Her research is super interesting. like you heard, she has more the actual research coming out February, March next year. So please stay tuned, and follow her for all that she does. She's very active on LinkedIn as well, and just make sure that you're connected with Judy. Okay, thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Good night.